We're building some cabins in eastern Kentucky. Over the last year that we've been doing that, we've accumulated a lot of stuff. We decided we would build a shop. I wanted it to be something simple, something fast to build, and I wanted to be able to make it with mostly wood that we've harvested there in Kentucky. This will be a video on building the roof trusses. I'm laying these trusses out on my shop floor. I'm using 2 perpendicular score joints in the concrete. That is more than accurate enough for this kind of truss. We determine the overall length and put the center of that span on the score joint in the concrete, and then we take a Sharpie and mark each end out on the floor. I want to take a minute and point out that these are not engineered trusses. This lumber is green. We literally cut a tree down and cut it into boards. So they are crooked, they are warped, they are wet. It does fine for the purpose we're doing, and if you're doing something similar, something to store some materials in and things like that, this will probably work great. But I do want to point that out, that if you're going to do something that you're going to live in, or keep your, $200,000 sports car underneath it, probably be worth consulting with somebody just to make sure you got it done right. We are going to make these trusses a 12-12 pitch. That means the rise and the run are the same. For every 12 foot of run, you've got 12 foot of rise, or 12 inches, whatever you want to call it. The nice thing about that is it gives you a tall attic, so you can put some storage in there, but it makes every angle you're going to cut on all of these truss parts, the rafter tails, the gussets we make out of plywood, everything is a 45-degree angle. It makes it much simpler to design, assemble, and to install. It does, however, make the roof deck and the roofing material itself a little trickier to put on because the roof is too steep to walk on when you get done. Pay attention to the cuts as we lay it out. The bottom of the truss, or the joist, gets the long points on the bottom, short points on the top, making it like a trapezoid. Each of the rafters gets one of each, top and bottom, if that makes sense. It is made like a parallelogram so that the ridge cut and the fascia cut at the rafter tail will both be plumb. You can pick any number you want for the size of the overhang. In this example, I'm using a framing square and measuring 12 inches down and 12 inches over. For a 12 and 12 pitch, you'll just want them to be the same. You could measure down the face of this rafter. You could do anything you want as long as both sides of every truss are the same. The trusses will need some center supports. We opted to do 2 here, which is probably overkill, but I wanted a little space down the middle to store some long items in the attic of the shed. Here we're going to take some 1/2-inch plywood and make some rips that we will turn into gussets. You're going to need a piece of plywood on either side of every joint where the truss components intersect. You want to glue them, and we put them down with some wide crown staples. We assembled the first truss, only putting gussets on one side for now. We're going to put it up on some horses to get it at a good working height and flip it over so that we can lay out the other trusses right on top of it and not have those gussets in the way. So this is my workshop here. It's big and it's quite accommodating to doing projects like this. Here, when we're building these trusses, it's about 100 degrees outside right now, so we've got air conditioning in there. It's quite the luxury. If you don't have something like this, and I recognize that most people don't, building these trusses just about anywhere, you can assemble one and put them on sawhorses, build them on top of each other, kind of like what we're doing, but you could do it outside in a driveway or even on the wooden deck or concrete deck for the building itself. It would work just fine. I would suggest, if you're going to do that on the wood or concrete deck for the structure you're building the trusses before you stand the walls up so they're not in the way, depending on how big it is. But in most cases, that would be a lot easier to do ahead of time. We're going to go ahead and sheet the gable ends. These are 12-inch poplar boards that we cut out of the logs we brought back from Kentucky. They are going to be both the shear sheeting and the siding as well. We'll put the batten strips on later. Pete is cutting the bottom off here. We're actually cutting it off about 1.5 inches lower than the bottom of the truss. That way it can overhang on the outside of the building so the water will drip off of this onto the siding of the end wall as well. Okay, so here is our clever way of building a door. We are going to install the door braces on the inside of the gable truss. That's in that opening we created for the attic storage. We're going to flip the truss back over, like you can see here. We will install the hinges on that siding, and we'll cut the door open later. This just keeps everything lined up. It allows the grain on that siding to run all the way through from above and below the door. It's really cool, and it's a super easy way to hold everything in place and make sure everything lines up when you're done. So here is the finished product. We power washed all the sawdust, and there was actually some mold on this wood from sitting around, but man, this wood looks really cool. This poplar has a lot of cool purples and all kinds of other colors. That will dull back up when it dries, but it looks cool for now. With the stack of trusses done, we're going to set them all aside and move this other stack of poplar inside and get framing on the walls. Stay tuned for that video next. Thanks for watching, guys.